So, ladies and gentlemen, today I have brought him back after, great demand. And as we mentioned in our last interview with Simon about, the D24 chart regarding education. So today he is going to jump right in to show you guys how to understand and study the D24 chaturvimshamsha chart regarding education. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to launch right into this today because we only have an hour or so, and there's a lot to cover.
Okay.
So when we're considering education, you have to understand that the subcharts, the D24 as well as the D9, the D10, are subcharts. They are versions of the main chart for a specific theme. So when we are looking at the D24, we want to find out what is the level of the person's education. And to do that, we have to start with the main chart. And so today I'm going to go pretty fast and go through an education pro forma to show you how you can look at education in the main chart, and then go into the subcharts. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start there and look at the education pro forma. So the first step is to look at the main chart through the lens of yoga vichara. Yoga vichara means does the person have yogas supporting education in their horoscope? And this is in my opinion, and in the opinion of my teachers, the most important step. The second is bhava vichara. Are the fourth house of education, the ninth house of higher education, and the fifth house of intellect strong to support good education? And then finally, we come to amsha vichara, which is the subcharts. Okay, so so let's begin really quick with with yoga vichara in the chart. And I'm going to go through these pretty quick. You guys, when you're watching the videos, you can stop, rewind, go back. But I'm going to just go through these. So the first yoga to look for in a chart to see if a person has the potential for education is Buddha Aditya Yoga. Buddha Aditya means Sun Mercury Yoga, Mercury Sun Yoga. And this is the combination of Sun and Mercury, which happens very often in many charts. But the key to understanding this yoga is they have to connect to the first or the fifth house, meaning it happens in the first, in the fifth, or in the seventh or the 11th, and therefore aspecting the fifth and the first house.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Or Sun or Mercury owns the first or the fifth house. Okay. This is how a Buddha Aditya yoga goes from being ordinary, which this combination happens a lot. Sun and Mercury are conjunct a lot, being an indicator for extraordinary intelligence. And by the way, just to back up here, why do we want to know a person's level of education? I think the answer is when you're trying to find career for a person, you can't be a lawyer if you don't have education. You can't be, an architect or a doctor.
Yeah.
You have to go to 8 years of school. So this isn't just about education, it's about the type of career the person can have. And so if you see in a chart that education is blocked, then you know that certain options are not available to them. They're not going to be a lawyer. They're not going to be a doctor. They may be an Ayurvedic doctor, which is a different type of education. They may be a paralegal, right? That's a third house type of education. But if they're missing the standard, then certain professions are out of reach. All right, the next yoga is called Sarasvati Yoga. Sarasvati, as you know, is the goddess of knowledge, but she's also the goddess of culture, wisdom, music, art, and refinement, which we sort of broadly term as culture in our vernacular. So this yoga in the main chart happens when Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, all three, are either in a Kendra, Trikona, or the second bhava. And Jupiter can't be afflicted, can't be combust, can't be in a planetary war, can't be debilitated. It should be in a good condition.
Now, you mean this Kendra Trikona position the actual Kendra Trikona, or can Jupiter, Venus, Mercury be Kendra from each other? And Trikona?
No, they have to occupy a Kendra or Trikona. This is
okay.
the classic definition of Sarasvati Yoga.
Okay.
All right, and we'll look at some examples here in a little bit of these yogas in play. The next yoga is called Kala Nidhi Yoga, which is now Kala is not Kala. Kala is time. Kala is a skill. There are 64 Kalas. If you read the Kama Sutra, for example, there's all the Kalas are there, and love making is one of them, and weaving and music and poetry, recitation, telling jokes is a Kala. So, you know, Kapiel, you're a master of quite a few Kalas here, right? You're video editor, joke teller, movie maker, Jyotishi, and traditionally an evolved, a cultured person, right, was supposed to have mastered a good number of these Kalas, including how to speak a foreign language, how to do accents, how to whistle. You know, it's been a while since I read these, but they're sort of coming back. So a Kala Nidhi Yoga means someone who has those skills, who has culture, who is widely read, who can, you know, have verbal repartee with you. And this is when Jupiter occupies the 2nd or the 5th house and is somehow influenced by Mercury or Venus. Meaning Jupiter can be in a sign of Mercury or Venus. Jupiter can be conjunct Mercury or Venus or aspected by Mercury or Venus. But more broadly, you can say simply Jupiter in any house influenced by Mercury or Venus is a type of Kala Nidhi Yoga.
Okay.
All right. So that's another combination for learning, education, and an interest in culture and education. All right. Another yoga is Sharada Yoga. This one is much more rare, and it happens when the 10th Lord is in the 5th, when Mercury is in the Kendra and Sun is Svarashi, in its own sign in Leo. Mercury is in a Kendra and the 10th Lord is in the 5th. There's another version of it when Jupiter and Mercury are in a trine to the moon. Honestly, I've never seen this yoga in practice. Maybe I just haven't really looked for it. But it's one of the yogas that is supposed to confer knowledge, wisdom, education. Okay. Then Kahala Yoga, the 9th Lord and the 4th Lord angular to each other. This is, so to your question, can they be angular to each other? This is a case where the 9th Lord and the 4th Lord. Why? Because the 9th Lord rules higher education. The 4th Lord rules up to bachelor's degree. And of course, some Jyotishis take the 5th house for education, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Classically, it's the 4th house is education. And the 1st Lord is strong. So this is Kahala Yoga. And by the way, you don't have to memorize all of these. Certainly the first 2 you should know because they're very common. They're more common. The rest, and Kala Nidhi is an interesting one. These, you know, are much more rare. Jaladi Yoga. This is when the 4th house is basically very strong, when it's aspected by benefics and the 4th Lord is very well situated. This is one of the 12 good yogas, meaning there's a yoga for each of the 12 houses when that house meets a specific criteria, like Chamara Yoga for the 1st house, Dhenu Yoga for the 2nd house, Shaurya Yoga for the 3rd house, and Jaladi Yoga for the 4th house, when they're very well and nicely placed. So Jaladi basically gives a propensity for education as well as living in a really nice house, coming from a good family, all those things. See, I'm focusing on yoga because yoga really sets the scene. Everybody has malefics somewhere in their chart. But if they have massive yogas, they're going to operate at a higher level than someone operating at a lower level. Meaning, someone with massive Lakshmi yoga and Dhana yogas is going to be a multimillionaire, whereas someone with just a nice 2nd house may still make a good living, but they're not at the level of the yoga person. So yogas are very important. Okay, finally, Parivartana Yoga involving the 4th house. When there is a Parivartana involving the 4th, education is highlighted. And Bhavat Bhavam, Lord of the 4th and the 7th, Lord of the 9th and the 5th. So these are some yogas, some rules for that encourage education in the horoscope.
Okay.
All right. Now, as I mentioned before, the bhava, looking just at a bhava will give you a certain amount of information. The amsha, which we're going to go into next, the D24, will give us more specific information. But yogas are really where it's at.
Okay.
Meaning, if a person has the yoga, it almost guarantees that they'll have a certain level of knowledge and education. So, in fact, let me just actually go to some examples now and see this stuff in action. This is a game that we're not going to look at. So this is the chart. Actually, I should probably put up the South Indian too, huh? For our viewers.
Yeah.
Let's do this. I'm sorry I didn't do this beforehand. I'm gonna let's do this. We'll chart. Voila, and let's change it to South Indian.
Okay.
Voila. All right, so this is the chart of Joseph Campbell. And in this chart, can you identify any of the yogas that we just mentioned? I know we went.
Yeah, the Sun, Mercury looking at the ascendant.
Boom, right away, right?
Yeah.
You have a Buddha Aditya yoga. And someone might say, but wait a minute, Mercury is debilitated. Yeah. Wait a minute, Mercury's combust. Yeah. But it still meets these criteria. And the rules for a combust planet is combustion will burn up the external significations of a thing. So if Mercury, say, ruled the 5th house of children, he may not have kids. If it ruled, you know, the 11th house of older siblings, he may not have, that's an external. But it will highlight, combustion will highlight the inner qualities. So the fact that Mercury is combust, I would argue, makes his intellect and insight even more bright and profound. So yes, very good. We have a Buddha Aditya yoga that is not only aspecting the 1st house, but it involves the ruler of the 1st house.
Mm-hmm.
So what about
4th Lord is in the 7th house.
Very good. So we have Bhavad Bhavam, the 4th Lord in the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So Bhavad Bhavam creates this thing of you have one thing after another. So one house after another. So probably he had multiple residences. But also 4th house rules education. So probably he had multiple degrees. Now, the reason we take the 4th house as education is because the 4th house is land, property, right? The home. And to go to school, you go to a university. It's an actual place, right? Whereas the 5th house is your internal place. It's your mind. And so the 5th house is important. It's your ability to process the education. But for the actual degree, the actual school, the university, we use the 4th house. So there you go. You have 2 of these.
Also, if you notice, he also has a spiritual yoga known as Vrinchi Yoga.
He has Vrinchi Yoga, which is the 5th Lord.
In the 5th, and Jupiter, Saturn are in Kendra.
You bet. Yeah, beautiful. Which which is for Brahma, right?
Yeah.
And
so natural spiritual knowledge also is becoming
deep spiritual knowledge. And Brahma is the creator. So he created a whole. He created a lot. He wrote a lot of books, but he wrote about the creative process of mythology, the hero's journey.
Okay.
So very good. And Brahma is, So Vrinchi Yoga, there are multiple yogas. I mean, there's Hamsa Yoga here with Jupiter, and we can.
Especially from Gemini, he's definitely a writer because Moon is in the 5th house from Karakamsha Lagna. So
right.
Makes him a prolific writer.
And that Moon is nice and juicy and being in Cancer. And I mean, he's got all kinds of yogas going on.
Yeah.
So when you see the level of yogas, you know this person is playing at at a field that's higher than, you know, most people.
Yeah.
Higher in the sense of public destiny. Anyway, so let's move on to another chart here. I actually Googled famous scholars. I went to a website, and the #1 person who came up was Angela Davis. Now, I wasn't really familiar with her. Read a little bit about her. She's a famous scholar, an African American woman who was who led a number of movements in the 60s.
Okay.
So, any yogas here? So we don't have Buddha-Aditya yoga, right?
No, but we have that 7th lord in the 9th house and Jupiter, Mercury, Venus trine from each other.
Right. So we have actually Sarasvati yoga. So
Yeah.
we have Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus all in trikonas.
Mm-hmm.
And Jupiter is nice and in a friendly sign, completely unafflicted by, well, he's aspected by Mars, but that's not a big deal. And a strong sambandha between all of the planets, meaning Jupiter aspects Mercury and Venus. And I'm sorry, here, let me make this the South Indian chart again as well. There we go. So Jupiter aspects here. So we have a very strong Sarasvati yoga, right?
Yeah.
And let's see if we can find, who else do we have? Mr. Einstein, Albert Einstein here. What do we see here for him?
5th lord is conjunct Buddha-Aditya yoga.
Yeah, so Venus is involved in the Buddha-Aditya yoga, right?
Yeah.
And Buddha-Aditya does involve the 1st house because Mercury rules the lagna, just like with Joseph Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
And Mercury is debilitated again. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, but it's getting a niche bang with the Venus as well, exalted Venus.
Big time Nichabanga.
Yeah.
Right. So what else do we see? So he has Buddha-Aditya yoga. Now look at this. He has the Kahala yoga. The Lord of the 4th and the Lord of the 11th are in kendras to each other.
Okay.
But the 1st Lord is not strong. The 1st Lord has to be strong. So in this case, it's not a classic yoga because the 1st Lord is debilitated. Despite the Nichabanga, he's still debilitated.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to honor that. What about Sarasvati yoga? Jupiter.
Oh,
Mercury.
2nd from Jupiter.
Well, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus are in a kendra or trikona.
Yeah.
And Jupiter is not afflicted. So this is a primo Sarasvati yoga. We also have a parivartana between the 9th, Jupiter in the 9th, and Saturn in the 10th. And that is another criteria, parivartana involving the 4th or the 9th house. So he's got 3 major yogas for knowledge, wisdom, education. Does that mean that everyone with a Sarasvati yoga will have a higher degree? No. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa has Sarasvati yoga, but he didn't have formal education. But he knew about everything. So the yoga ensures that you have the spirit of the education, not necessarily the letter or the piece of paper. But when it's combined with other yogas and with the amsha, which we'll see in a second, it can show us higher degree. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so let's go back to our presentation here. And all right, so now we come to the topic of today, which is the chaturvimshamsha or siddhamsha.
Mm-hmm.
And so here are the basic rules. I mean, it's pretty simple. You look for these same yogas in the D24 chart. That guarantees now that this person's education will be successful. So look, and this applies to all of the D charts. So if you're looking for career, look at the D10 and look for, you know, any of the Mahapurusha yogas, Ruchaka yoga, Shasha yoga, Hamsa yoga. Look at Gaja Kesari yoga. Look at Parvata yoga. You can see the yogas for career success in the career chart. In the education subchart, look for the yogas for education that we just covered. That's one technique. The second technique, which I use very often and which I mentioned in the last podcast, is look for the relevant dasha period. Meaning, if you're running Rahu, what's Rahu doing in your D24? Is it in the 8th house? In that case, you can forget about higher education during that period, whether it's a bhukti or a dasha. Is it in the 3rd house? You're going to have an interruption. So the rule for Amsha Vichara is if a graha is in the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th house, 3, 6, 8, 12, it will block the meanings of that Amsha's matter, whatever it rules. So if it's relationships for the D9, they'll be obstructed during the period of a planet in the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th. Those are the Dustanas.
Because the fact is negating the 4th house? 3rd house?
3rd, because this is straight from Sheshadri Iyer's method of Amsha interpretation. Because in his experience, Sheshadri Iyer, by the way, is the guy who brought us the yogi, the avayogi, the Dagda Rashis, the mathematical Navamsha, and a whole bunch of other really cool stuff. He was a great researcher in the 70s and 60s, mathematician. And he found that the 3rd house in the D charts was just as bad as the 6, 8, and 12. And he tested this on many charts, and he found that when the person ran the period, say Rahu, I'm running, and Rahu was in the 3rd house of whatever subchart, that subchart suffered. If it was siblings, the person got separated from their siblings. If it was spouse, the D9, the person got a divorce or got separated.
Regardless of the fact that planet might be exalted, debilitated.
Regardless. Exalted means you do it on your terms. You know, you're at power. An exalted planet affects the world. So your planet's exalted, you have the power to effectuate an outcome. Debilitated planet, the world affects you. You feel powerless. But yeah, so an exalted planet is more in control. So if it's in the 3rd house, maybe they choose to, well, let's take some time off. But that's the general rule. If it's well placed, it's in any house other than 3, 6, 8, 12. Okay. In fact, let's take a look at this. Let's take an example of this. Let's take a look at Joseph Campbell's. By the way, I pulled this up last night, and I just looked at it last night. I haven't prepared these charts in advance, but this one seemed to correlate with Joseph Campbell's life. So let's take a look here. So Joseph Campbell was born in 1904. So the key when analyzing subcharts is, or particularly the education, is you have to look at the educational period. We usually go to school when we're teenagers and in our 20s. Mm-hmm. That's the important time. So what was he running? Well, he was running Mercury from 1912 to 1929, and then he started Ketu. All right? So now Mercury, so basically from 1912, he was 8 years old through about age 25. He ran Mercury. Mercury already participates in this nice Buddha-Aditya yoga, but let's look at his D24. I'm going to pull it up here. Here's the D24.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And let me pull it up again in South Indian so we can look here. 1 second. And let's make it. All right, let me move this. All right, now what do you think of this D24?
Oh, beautiful Sarasvati Yoga happening and Buddha-Aditya Yoga happening.
So we have these yogas reduplicated in the chart. Buddha-Aditya in the Lagna. Sarasvati, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus in Trikonas. all the planets are strong. Why Mercury has, you could say, Digbala, Jupiter has Digbala. Venus is debilitated, but that's not a deal breaker. Remember, only Jupiter has.
Choose the aspect of Jupiter and Parivartan Yoga with Mercury.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, yes, so there you go. The yogas are reduplicated, and during his Mercury period, that's going to activate education for him. So up to age 25, this guy is going to be a rock star in school. But look at what happens next. Then he runs Ketu. So what do you think of Ketu?
It's going to stop the education.
Yeah. And so, look, I didn't know anything about his life. So last night I Wikipedia'd him. And so his Ketu starts 1929. 1929 is when the Depression hit. He stopped the education and started wandering around, living with tribes. He was still in the mind of studying and doing research, but the formal education stopped. Do you see that? I mean, Jyotish is amazing because the moment he began Ketu is not well placed for education, despite the fact that he has a very strong education chart. So you have to take the dasha, the bhukti the person is in, and plug them into the subchart to see what the potential is. How do you think he did once Venus started?
I think he must have done quite well again.
Yeah, so he started up and he actually started teaching at a university. So this is the karmas. You know, all of these grahas are seeds. And they're the seeds that contain the totality, all the fruits of the karmic tree that your life is. But we don't experience all of those fruits at the same time. They only blossom, they only sprout when their time comes. And so he was bound to experience a break in his education during Ketu. And that's just how it is. Let's take a look at someone else. Now, I haven't looked at Bill Gates's chart, so let's do it for fun. Actually, let's look at Angela Davis first.
Okay.
I'm curious about her. Let's look at her dasha here really quick, what she ran. Move this over. All right, so she was born in 1944. So from age 4 to 22, she ran Rahu and then Jupiter.
Okay.
All right. So let's take a look. I have not looked at her D24, so this will be interesting to know. Here's her D24. I'm going to pull it up here in the main chart. D24, okay, and then let's do this. Same thing for our South Indian chart reading buddies. And go. All right, so this is her D24. So during Rahu, how is her Rahu placed?
In the 7th house.
Yeah.
In
So,
Indra.
you know, it's not spectacular. It's aspected by Saturn, but it's also aspected by Venus. But it's not in a bad house. So Rahu should have gone well, normally at least. What about Jupiter?
Very well placed.
Very well placed. In the 9th house, retrograde. Does she have any of the yogas we mentioned?
She has the Sarasvati Yoga with the Jupiter, Venus in angle from each other.
Well, she almost has Sarasvati. Mercury's in the 11th.
Yeah.
But can we fudge this a little bit? Maybe.
Oh, Mercury's looking at the 5th house.
Mercury is looking at the 5th, but it's not a Buddhaditya yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she kind of has a, what she does have is, let me see here. Like I said, I haven't looked at this, but so she has a Sarasvati-like yoga. Jupiter in the 9th, Venus in the 1st, just Mercury is out of the classic definition.
Yeah.
But coming back to the idea of how do you interpret the D24, when you run the period of a planet that's well placed, the matters that D chart rules will prosper. They will flourish. So for her, education should have flourished through her Jupiter Dasha. Okay?
Mhm.
It's that simple. Let's take a look at Einstein here. Let's look at his D24. He ran Ketu and then Venus. Both of them are in the 4th house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he had troubles with his education, but he got a higher degree and he became a professor.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now let's look at really quick Bill Gates. Bill Gates. Let's look at his D24. Here is his D24. Oops. Let's see. He was born in 1955. So basically, he ran Mercury throughout his formative years.
Mm-hmm.
And now this chaturvimshamsha, by the way, is at 29 degrees 44. So it's highly suspect.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates' time is not really exact. So if we move it up a minute, well, it still puts Mercury in a positive bhava.
But remember, he left Harvard.
He left Harvard.
I feel like around Ketu period, he must have stopped.
He must have. That's very interesting because look, Ketu now is in the 12th house.
That's what I saw.
I wonder when did, if we could do, see, I didn't, let's just look at this.
He left it around 18, 19 years old, I believe.
When did Bill Gates leave Harvard? Let's take a look. Fall of 73. No,
Yeah.
He dropped out in 75. Gates entered Harvard fall of 73, only to drop out 2 years later. 75. So let's see what's happening in 75.
Ketu starts.
Ketu starts.
So I guess this is his D24 chart.
And this is now a way to rectify a horoscope. Because if he were born at the time it says he was born.
Yeah, no, he should have a good education because Jupiter then aspects Ketu. He should have gone all the way through.
Beautiful. So this is how you can use the subcharts, the D24, the D9 for divorce and marriage. If someone says, oh, I got married and everything is in their 8th house when they got married, that can't be the Navamsha.
Yeah.
It's got to be, moved. So here we just move it a minute and now this Ketu makes a lot of sense. Okay. And so there you go. He breaks from his education. Ketu is a separative influence. It's in the 12th house of the D24. The deal's done. Now, if this person's mother is coming to you and she's saying, oh, my son is thinking about, or my son is going to college and he says he wants to quit, tell him not to quit. Tell him he's such a smart boy. Please, I believe in Jyotish. Tell him something. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I was going to say, well, I'm sorry, lady. He's going to have to leave.
Man, you're harsh.
Yeah.
I would take Mataji's hands into mine and say, he has a destiny that is taking him. His karmas are taking him.
I know, yeah.
Right? You're like,
but don't
sorry,
worry, he'll be a billionaire.
Right. But he has Lakshmi Yoga. He has, Dhana Yogas.
Don't worry, he'll be the richest man on the planet, but just no education.
Just quote unquote, no education, because this is where the karma is taking him.
Yeah.
And this is a map of karma. This is the chart is nothing but a 2-dimensional karmic map. The world, the universe, is a 3-dimensional karmic map. So sometimes Jyotishis take their cue from nature, from the world, because the universe leaves clues. 2 birds fly by and someone asks me about relationships. Will I ever find a husband? And I'll say, yes, of course. Because I just saw 2 birds fly by and they were a couple. They were together and flying, right? And let's say they land in a tree very close to me and they'll say, when? I'll say within a year, very soon, because they're right there. They're very close. But let's say they land in a tree that's farther away, but I can still see it. I'll say within 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's still within reach. But if they, fly very far away, then So you see, Jyotish is not just this patrika, this two-dimensional flat map.
Yeah.
It's the matrix, and the matrix is all around us. You just have to take the right pill to be able to read it.
Exactly.
So, so there it is. This is Bill Gates's karma. All right, so let's go back to the presentation really quick, which is here. All right, so we looked for yogas, now we looked for the relevant dasha period, and so here is the rule. If a planet occupies 3, 6, 8, or 12, it'll create obstacles or terminate the matter. There is a qualitative difference. So the third house tends to terminate the matter. Remember, the third house is the eighth from the eighth, so it is a chart, it is a house indicating death. It is the bhavad bhavam of the eighth house, one thing ending after another. The sixth house indicates obstacles. So it may not necessarily indicate the termination of the thing, but a lot of obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
The eighth house is the death of the matter, and the 12th is you're losing it or creating distance. The 12th house is it's like it's long distance travel. It's being in an ashram or in jail. It's being isolated from that thing. So if this is in your D9 and you're about to enter that period, I might say, well, listen, are you planning on spending some time apart with your husband? And the person might say, yeah, I'm going to go on an extensive yoga retreat in India for 6 months. And I'll say, okay, that fits what I'm seeing. So it may not necessarily be a divorce, but it's a physical separation, right? 12th house in the D chart. If it's career, you may take time off from your job. So, so those are the basic rules, and now we just have to put them into practice.
One thing I wanted to ask is about the type of education a person will do. Can you put some light on that?
Yeah, well, even for that, I want to start with the main chart before we go to the subchart. So when we're talking the main chart, we're talking which house. So just when you look at a person's main chart, let's go back to one where we have both of them up. Whose chart do we have? All right, let's just put Albert Einstein up here again. That South Indian. All right. Oops, this is a D24. Let's make it Janma. When we look at the main chart, one of the basic things you can do is see which house is emphasized, because here's a secret. The truth is, every bhava in the horoscope is an education bhava. For example, the first house involves physical culture. Arnold Schwarzenegger has the Lord of the First in the first, aspected by Jupiter in a full moon. It's like the juiciest house in his horoscope. He knows everything there is to know about physical culture, the body, how to develop it, how to present yourself, that's a type of knowledge. You see? So actors, politicians, bodybuilders, they have to have a strong first house. Now, it's not, and so if the person goes to school, you've already checked their D24, they're going to go to school, you can say you might major in some physical kind of education or something related to the first house. If their second house is exceptional, then the person will excel at a number of things. The second house rules mathematics, accounting, numbers, but it also rules sacred knowledge. The second and the eighth house rule Shastra, oral tradition, spoken tradition. So if the mama, the worried mama who's wringing her hands, right, going, oh, what is my son going to study? He said, no one did to go to school. And he's got such a strong second house. You might say, well, mama, this boy is meant to study sacred tradition. The stuff they teach in school just puts you into debt. It's useless for him. Let him go deep into the sacred tradition, right? So that's second house. Third house is education for certification. This is massage license, real estate license, Ayurvedic practitioner, anything that requires a type of license. You go to school for 6 months to a year, cosmetician, right? So if a person has a very emphasized third house, they don't need necessarily to go to university. You need to get your real estate license and start working, okay? Then fourth house is classical education. Fifth house is also education, but it can be in the arts, in music, entertainment, acting, all that stuff. Sixth house is health-related education, and so on. So every house has it will show you an emphasis. So in the case of Einstein, you know, we see a very emphasized 10th house. And the 10th house is the house of classic careers: architect, doctor, professor, lawyer, that kind of thing. And so in his case, you know, we are looking for a classic kind of education. And he was a professor, in fact. But the 10th house also rules the sky, right? It's what's directly above us.
Mm-hmm.
So all his life, he was interested in the sky, which is kind of
especially with the sign of Pisces, which represents outer world.
It represents not just our sky, but the ultimate sky, right? It's infinity and beyond. So when we're looking at which type of education specifically is suitable for the person, we want to look first which bhava is emphasized. Second, which are the grahas that are emphasized. So if a person has the Mars, Ketu, Rahu, Saturn emphasized, those are the inanimate grahas that have to do with things, with metal, with dhatu, with so technology, computers, land, machinery, engineering, right? Stuff that doesn't have to do with interpersonal communication, working with machines. Whereas Jupiter, Venus, Mercury are the human grahas. Has to do with teaching, with networking, with politics, with working with people. So those are two basic subcategories. So if Jupiter, Venus, Mercury are emphasized, the person is going to be a humanist. Human interaction is going to be very important in their work. So with Einstein, we have Venus, Mercury, Sun, also Saturn. So there's a Saturn is science, a scientific element as well. But mostly he was not just interested in physics as, you know, why does light bend the way it bends for the sake of that? It was, what does it mean for us as a human being?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would it feel to travel on a light ray at the speed of light? He made it human, right? Whereas no other scientist was thinking that way. So that's another binary category. Is the person more interested in things, metal, machines, or in human beings? Because that's going to help you, you know, get narrow it down. Then, you know, then from there, from that basic category, you can go a number of directions. One of them, which is using the nakshatras. So, you know, Kritika nakshatra has to do with technology. It's Agni is the ruler, you know, so you can say this person will be interested in technology. Or Rohini has to do with, you know, farming and fruits and produce and so from there you have a lot of you have different ways to judge the type of education. But you know, honestly, Kapiel, I've rarely had, yes, I've had a few young people ask me, what should I study? Most of the time, people already know. So when I look at the horoscope and I look at, say, they're running Rahu, Rahu is well placed for education in both their main chart and the D24, and it's conjunct Mars and Saturn aspects. I'm going to say technology, computer related, engineering. I did a whole class on career. It's on somewhere on YouTube just based on the planets in the kendras.
In Kendra, I remember with Jupiter, Mars creates a lawyer.
Right.
And with
right.
certain planets creates a politician.
Exactly.
Jupiter, Venus, an actor. Yeah, I remember. But
exactly.
you also go by the pool of thought about looking at the fifth from Mercury or fifth from the current Mahadasha Lord to see the type of education they'll be attracted to. And
sure, you can do that. I mean, I don't do it personally, but that's certainly a valid technique. And I mean, you could look at, there's so many techniques in Jyotish for people.
yeah.
And one technique works perfectly for one person, and when someone else uses it, they don't get the same results.
Yeah.
You just have to find what
works with your energy. Yeah. Now you were going to tell us the difference between why certain astrologers use fourth house versus fifth house. Like I use more of the fifth house, and you're coming from the fourth house pool of thought, which makes sense about the school part. So why is there the discrepancy in there?
There's a discrepancy because there's different texts. Parashara, Satyacharya, I believe, it's been a while since I've checked, but I'm pretty sure that they advocate the fourth for education, but other experts advocate the fifth. And I think the difference is cultural. So if you go back 5,000 years, maybe there weren't schools around. And for education, you have to have a good buddhi. The fifth house is buddhi. Okay? Your ability to chew and digest and assimilate information. And so you need a good fifth house to learn. And so in places where institutions weren't, where the guru came to your house or you went to the guru's house, the guru first checked your fifth to see if you're going to have an education. You get it?
Yeah.
To see, all right, is this person capable? So they said the fifth house is education. But the actual place nowadays, we go to a university. Even online, you're logging in and going to their server to, even though you might be at home. So the fourth house, and the fourth house is also how you're brought up by your mom, by your parents from an early age. It's how you're cultured. It's the culturing of your mind before you're able to use your own buddhi. Because let's face it, a lot of education is just 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 7 is 35. It's repetition.
Yeah.
You're not really taught to be an independent thinker. That's more after you graduate. That's post, degree studies, and that's ninth house, fifth and ninth house. So the way I take education is fourth house is, second house is up to high school. Fourth house is up to college, basic college degree. And then ninth house is master's and PhD in the American system. Now, in different countries, they have a different way of, but if you want to take it age-wise, I guess you could say fourth house.
It like if second house is more of early education of like first grade to like sixth grade and learning from family.
Exactly.
Fourth house is up to high school, and then fifth house is more like basic bachelor's, and then ninth house PhD.
Correct. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Ninth house master's and PhD, both very interesting. Both higher educational programs. So I'm on camera right now, so you guys can verify this. I did an unconscious facial movement, which I became conscious of. I did this sneer, because I didn't finish my my higher degree, and this is contempt. So what I did there was, I'm self-analyzing, by the way. I'm doing face reading now. Is I was at the time very contemptuous of the educational system. I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go study Ayurveda and Jyotish. And
that's same with me. I don't have a bachelor's degree either. I never completed my formal studies.
And yet, I also have one of these moms who, does this. Son, why don't you finish and become a doctor? Right? Yeah. So how do you explain to moms? Well, anyway, so our face also is part of the chart.
Yeah.
So that was a little tangent, but yeah. So that's the basic point. Fourth house up to associates or bachelors, and then the ninth house higher.
Beautiful. Can you repeat the name of the astrologer again? The Iyer person who said about the 3, 6, 8, 12?
Iyer, Iyer, Sheshadri, Sheshadri Iyer.
Kshatri Iyer. Okay.
Yeah, he wrote 2 books. One called New Techniques of Prediction.
Okay.
He was a South India astrologer, brilliant mathematician. He also wrote a book on horse racing, but
Oh, that must be your favorite.
It doesn't work, and I think he gave it up. But all of us Jyotishis who want to test stuff, we all kind of go into the horse racing and sports stuff.
Yeah.
I had a chart up here. Let me see.
You use more KP when it comes to like.
No.
No.
Look, this is a chart: Atlanta versus Philly, and Philly was the underdog. And as soon as I saw this, here's the ascendant, Pluto right 1 degree from the ascendant, guaranteed the favorite's going to lose this game. And
wow.
Big time. That's how fast, in 5 seconds, 10, I mean, I had to check some other things, right? Make sure everything else.
But you see how the ascendant lord is beautifully placed in Gachkeshri Yoga in the 10th house. Wouldn't that conflict your mind?
Yeah, it does. Well, look, I spent years researching this. The result is my book called Gambler's Dharma.
Yeah.
And in that book, I distill all my thousands of hours of scratching my head and spending money, losing money to figure out what really, really works. And folks, once you get what really works, it takes you 10, 20 seconds to see a chart and go, oh, this team's going to win. And in fact, Philly, the underdog, won 10-3. This is yesterday. I just watched this game yesterday. So, and I predicted it beforehand, which I can show you the ticket here. I mean, this is not.
But this is not the type of technique you have in your book, the Gambler's Dharma, which you sent me. I have that book.
Yes, this is from Gambler's Dharma. So I just want to show you the. Here, let me share this.
You won.
You see that?
Yeah.
This is from yesterday. So you click on that, and there's that prediction. Right? Philadelphia Phillies.
Oh man, you made some money yesterday.
No, 100. I mean, when
you doubled it.
I put my money where my mouth is. So when I talk about this stuff, what I'm saying is these techniques are, I don't like fluff. So when you look at a chart and you go, oh, that's a nice Gajikesari yoga. Yeah, but is that going to produce a victory? So I distilled the stuff that actually works. So when planets are conjunct sensitive points, so Saturn here at 27, 28 degrees was actually conjunct, where's Saturn? Was within range of the 12th cusp. I talk about that in the book, and that also the victory for the underdog. Anyway, so I'm kind of, again, going off on a tangent, but what was the point? The point was that Jyotish, that predicting education, predicting career, the point was we were talking about Sheshadri Iyer. He tested things to see if they work in the real world. And so the stuff that I'm sharing that the Sheshadri Iyer taught, this stuff works, man. When you see Ketu in the 12th house in the D24, that's it. No more school for you.
Mm-hmm.
You get it?
Absolutely.
And the way he tested his techniques was also in a similar way that I've tested them, is prove them in the real world. Does this stuff work? And if it doesn't, you got to be humble and go, all right, I was wrong, and try again.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect. And just wanted to ask you, what's your website so where people can go and learn more from you or see your books, read it?
Yeah. So I actually even made a little page for that. So let's see. Here are the techniques, examples. We went through that. contact information. There you go.
Okay. Perfect.
That's spirittype.com is the website, and siddhadeva@yahoo.com. I'm happy to answer questions for people.
Are you doing any upcoming courses that people can be interested in?
No, but I have courses on my website,
Okay.
and both the prediction course, the sports course, my Dharma type certification course, all of them are available on the website.
You know,
And
I
again,
wanted to actually do that when you were talking about looking at people's dharma.
oh yeah,
Understanding. I want to bring you back and we can discuss some of that.
sure. I'll share with you my techniques for finding your dharma in the horoscope.
Perfect. So, no, I'll email you. Then let's do that.
Okay.
Let's set up a time.
All right.
Thank you so much, Simon.
Hari Om. Thank you.